Hi, Devika.
Good evening to all of you. I'm Sujata Shankar from Intach, Chennai chapter. A warm welcome to all of you who've joined today for our second program for the Madras Day celebrations this August. Today we have a talk on Swadeshi and Mahatma Gandhi's connection to the city. It's an honor to welcome the most talented VR Devika, who's been a great friend of Intach. She's given many lectures to colleges and schools for Intach. Welcome to Krishnamurthy Mohan of the Gandhi Study Center, who will share his thoughts and present his observations at the end of the program. Intach, the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, is in its 36th year dedicated to conservation, having been founded in 1984. Intach Chennai chapter has been creating awareness about the culture and cultural heritage of the city and its significance through various programs and initiatives through the year. Some of these include walks, talks, workshops for architects and engineers, for the corporation and PWD, cleaning temple tanks, and restoring heritage structures. We've made documentary films, brought out a heritage guide to the architecture of Madras, and also a heritage map of the city. For children, we've held heritage quizzes, role play, essay and drawing competitions, the most recent just before lockdown being a painting and essay competition called the Icon of Change to celebrate the 150th year of Gandhi's birth. I'm indeed very happy to share today that out of 12,000 entries that were received nationwide, 10 national winners have been declared, and one of them who's been selected is from our own Madras, Neeraja Karpagam of class 9 in Sir Sivaswamy Kalalaya Senior Secondary School. The upcoming programs include on the next 3 Thursdays, Temples of Madras, especially for children, by Dr. Chitra Madhavan on the 20th of August, and the Heritage of the Buckingham Canal by Venkatesh Ramakrishnan on the 27th of August, and a puppetry show, Tolpavai Kuthu, on September 3rd by Hari Krishnan. Before I hand over the mic to Malavika to formally introduce Devika, just a few mundane announcements. I request all the participants to please stay on mute right through the program. And if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box and it will be taken up at the end of the program. And if you wish to be in touch with us or on our mailing list, or if you wish to become a member, please mail us at intachchennai@gmail.com. Over to Malavika to introduce Devika. And Devika, we look forward to a wonderful program today, as always. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Can you hear me, all of you?
Yes.
I introduced Dr. V.R. Devika as the founder and managing trustee of the Asima Trust, a non-profit organization for linking traditional performing arts and education and Mahatma Gandhi education. Her PhD thesis is on Gandhian communication for transformation, philosophical issues and dimensions at the Department of Philosophy, University of Madras. She spins on the charka. She is a trained Bharatanatyam classical dancer under the Dhananjayans and has researched folk forms. She gives lectures on theory and practice of the dance and culture of India. She is also a well-known storyteller and has authored the coffee table book, Ward 10, Remembering Rangabhashyam, and has contributed to several national and international journals on art and philosophy. She's been an art critic for The Hindu, The Week, The Indian Express, and Financial Express. She's worked at the All India Radio since 1974 and has done several television programs. She's been a school teacher for PS Senior Secondary School, Chennai from 1976 to 85. She was Director for Education and Culture of the Madras Craft Foundation and its project, Dakshin Chitra, 1985 to 96. She's pioneered a folk arts in education program that helps schools in Chennai to engage seriously with folk artists. She is a consultant currently for Patashala, KFI, Mallipuram, and has also taught at SS Jain College and VIT Chennai on culture. Devika is a recipient of several awards. She's been awarded the honorary citizenship by the Governor of Maryland, honored by British Council, Goethe Institute, Bharat Kalachar, Natyanjali, the Amir Khusro Music Academy, Sri Krishna Gana Sabha, and many, many clubs like the Rotary Clubs, the Lioness Club, and the Kannada Sangam, and Samudra Magazine and Ru Magazine. Ma'am, we are honored to have you here today. We are really looking forward to today's session with you. And sir, you too, we are looking forward to today's session. Thank you. Over to Devika, ma'am.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. Very kind of you. Um, I have been spinning. As a school teacher, I looked at Gandhi's education policy, and I felt he had such a vision for India. Some of ideas may be archaic, as many people may think, but the wisdom behind those ideas have been so interesting. And it's such a vast subject that one can go on and on and on. But I have a small presentation for today on Gandhi and Swadeshi and Gandhi in Madras. So let me. Okay, so, Gandhi's Swadeshi was actually fearlessness. For him, being fearless was an important aspect of Swadeshi. To not feel frightened by anything that comes your way, and to be firm in your belief and in your action is what Swadeshi meant to Gandhi. Exemplified by this picture, just look at this woman who's standing there with a flower, and the way she is standing and looking at the police officer who has a stick behind him, and ominous the way he is coming at her. And look at that glance of this lady, the way she is looking at the policeman. This fearlessness was what Gandhi brought into the freedom movement after he came back from South Africa and began to get involved in the freedom movement. Till then, the ordinary person of India was not as involved in the freedom movement as before. So here a kind of a spring was let loose, and everybody began to join in the freedom movement. And that, I feel, is the Gandhi Swadeshi that he brought.
Gandhi landed on British soil with thoughts of the hard task ahead. I am here to vindicate the honor of India and to uphold truth as I see it, for I believe it is the keystone of life.
So, and what is fearlessness? Here was a man who was going in October, end of October, to London, and then, of course, was going to Switzerland and different parts of Europe. And this is the costume he wears. Isn't that part of fearlessness? He was looking at his Swadeshi image, that he was representing the poorest person in India. And that is what he wanted to show the world, He was giving a message to the whole world with his costuming that, we are not depending on anybody else. We are going to depend on our own efforts and our own two legs. And if he can wear sandal without socks and not have his head covered in London in October, I call that fearlessness, absolutely. And look at this picture. When this was 1931, and he wanted to go and meet all the women and men who were working in textile mills, who were losing their jobs because of him, because of his Swadeshi movement in India, when he had asked Indians to boycott Western clothing and spin their own clothes. And the mill had shut down in England. And he said he would like to go and meet these people. And he was warned that there might be hostility and people may not take kindly to his visit. But the minute he got down from the car, this is the way people came and hailed him. And why would that be? Because he was very sure that when you are boycotting a good or goods from another country, you are not boycotting the people of that country. When something happens, we don't hold everybody responsible, everybody belonging to that group responsible for the action that happened by a few people. So he said, I'd like to cut India off from British Empire, but not from British nation. Nation is made of people, and the empire is the policy and the government. We want to get ourselves free from the British rule, but not from the British people, because they will be our friends. We are not going to ban them or boycott them. This is what his policy was. And this policy made it that you are looking at the action and not the person who has done the action. So this is exemplified in the way he conducted himself in England in 1931. And at that visit, there was this gentleman leaning out of the window there, wanting to meet Gandhi. All of us know him, and I think several of you must have guessed who he is. Charlie Chaplin, who had been banned by the establishment in the US because of some of his movies that had talked for the working class, and he was considered anti-national because he was speaking for the poor people, and he was exiled from the US. And when he was boarding a ship, a letter was delivered to him saying he was not welcome back in the United States. So he was living in exile, and he came to meet with Gandhi in London. And this is Charlie Chaplin with Gandhi. And we know that some of the iconic movies, among the iconic movies that he produced, and the Great Dictator, considered one of the greatest movies of the history of movie making. With just that, the tramp dancing so beautifully and criticizing Hitler at a time when Hitler was powerful, and to give this powerful message that you can't play with power and with the whole world because of your own greed and your own desire to conquer everything, given in such a beautiful manner by Charlie Chaplin. These ideas he got after meeting with Gandhi and several other people who were talking of peace in the world when the whole world was going into war. Now, why was Swadeshi a necessity for us? It is because the textile business was the biggest profit making venture for the British people. They bought our cotton textiles and much more than spices, because spices they could get from Indonesia and other places. But it was the cotton textiles that was the biggest business for in India for the British. So John Forbes Watson had been commissioned in 1866 to go and look at all the textile manufacturers and costumes. And he created this textile museum, kind of mobile museum with 700 samples in 18 volumes. He traveled all over India and looked at the necessity for clothing in India, how Indian people clothed themselves, and what is the length of the clothing required for men and women in different parts of India, what is the kind of costume, how do they manufacture their own clothing. He created these 18 volumes with 700 samples, and the pages look like this with drawings and textiles attached. It is a very important documentation of the textile traditions in India in the 1800s. So in 1849, the British had 2 million pounds of business in textiles in India. And after this study by Forbes, and they adapted how thin, cheap cotton can be produced in the mills, and how cotton could become the raw material for the mills that were set up after the Industrial Revolution in Britain, the business rose to 27 million pounds. This was when, I have just put this because of it's very funny. The British, though they were coming to India to rule and stay and have children in India, but they didn't want to wear our clothing. So from there, they had a list of things that they could bring when they came to India. And irrespective of the weather, the tropical climate that was here, they were bringing all these kind of British clothing, and they had to go to hills so that at least a little bit of the English weather they can experience at some part of the year, but still wear their own clothing because they did not trust Indian clothing. They could not adapt themselves to Indian clothing, while we adapted to the British clothing very, very quickly. And, we continuously experimented with wearing coat over kacha pancham, and things like that. Men and women, we started wearing this kind of saris. We gave up the sari. We wore underskirts under our saris. So we started adapting to the British ways of dressing, but they did not adapt to our ways of dressing up. So Dadabhai Navroji, who became a member of the British Parliament, he was concerned with this drain of resources from India. It was the economic drain from India that was going to Britain, and everything, all resources were being taken away from India. Both intellectual and material resources were being drained from India. So he said, if they are manufacturing cheaper clothing in the textile mills, we should also set up textile mills. So he wrote Poverty and Un-British Rule in India as early as 1904. And he was very keen on making India the manufacturer and not British mills, clothing in India. And at this time in 1905, when the partition of Bengal happened by Lord Curzon, where the working class were in East Bengal, whereas the richer people were in the West Bengal, that is when people began to realize that there is this division being created between the haves and have-nots when we depend on each other. And that is when people began to understand that we must wear our own clothing, even if it is the coarse and thick and difficult to wear, we must wear our own clothing. So they began singing this song, Mayare Devo Mota Kapur, and things like that. This was taken to a different level by Gandhi after he came in 1918 to India, and he took up spinning, and he brought this whole idea of manufacturing not to a mill but to the individual level, that every individual must spin, make and produce yarn, and that yarn can become clothing either for themselves or for someone else. This was shaped by Mahatma Gandhi. And I think this song is
মায়ের দেওয়া মোটা কাপড় মাথায় তুলে নে রে ভাই, দিন দুঃখিনী মাঝ তোদের তার বেশি আর সাধ্য নাই। মায়ের দেওয়া মোটা কাপড় মাথায় তুলে নে রে ভাই, দিন দুঃখিনী মাঝ তোদের তার বেশি আর সাধ্য নাই। ওই মোটা সুতোর সঙ্গে মায়ের অপার স্নেহ দেখতে পাই, ওই মোটা সুতোর সঙ্গে মায়ের অপার স্নেহ দেখতে পাই। আমরা এমনি পাষাণ তাই ফেলে ওই ঘরের দরে ভিক্ষে চাই, এমনি পাষাণ তাই ফেলে ওই ঘরের দরে ভিক্ষে চাই। মায়ের দেওয়া মোটা কাপড় মাথায় তুলে নে রে ভাই, দিন দুঃখিনী মাঝে তোদের তার বেশি আর সাধ্য নাই। ওই দুঃখী মায়ের ঘরের তোদের সবার প্রচুর অন্ন নাই, ওই দুঃখী মায়ের ঘরে তোদের সবার প্রচুর অন্ন নাই। তবু তাই বেঁচে কাজ সাবান মোজা কিনে করলি ঘর বোঝাই, তাই বেঁচে কাজ সাবান মোজা কিনে করলি ঘর বোঝাই। মায়ের দেওয়া মোটা কাপড় মাথায় তুলে নে রে ভাই, দিন দুঃখিনী মাঝে তোদের তার বেশি আর সাধ্য নাই। হায় রে আমরা মায়ের নামে এই প্রতিজ্ঞা করব ভাই, হায় রে আমরা মায়ের নামে এই প্রতিজ্ঞা করব ভাই। ঘরের জিনিস কিনবো না যদি মায়ের ঘরের জিনিস পাই, ঘরের জিনিস কিনবো না যদি মায়ের ঘরের জিনিস পাই। মায়ের দেওয়া মোটা কাপড় মাথায় তুলে নে রে ভাই, দিন দুঃখিনী মাঝে তোদের তার বেশি আর সাধ্য নাই। মায়ের দেওয়া মোটা কাপড় মাথায় তুলে নে রে ভাই, দিন দুঃখিনী মাঝে তোদের তার বেশি আর সাধ্য নাই। দিন দুঃখিনী মাঝে তোদের তার বেশি আর সাধ্য নাই।
this idea of cotton cloth as a symbol for freedom for Swadeshi was in the 1910s already. And I've heard stories that this was being sung in the corners of Bengal when Bengal was divided, and around that time when that idea that we must start looking at Swadeshi, because after 200 years of rule, when before that there was hardly any federalism and we had different kinds of kingdoms around, and here was an idea that we must stand on our legs and produce in India. So in 1909, Gandhi goes to London from South Africa, looking at what is good for India, and he encounters many people from India and the English people, And when he goes back in to South Africa on board the ship, he starts writing Hind Swaraj. He says Indian home rule, Hind Swaraj is what we must look at. And this is one book that he wrote. He was so full of passion that he borrowed the pink paper from the ship's stationery and he started writing furiously. And when his right hand got tired, he wrote with his left hand. And he said till he died that he will not change anything from Hind Swaraj because he was so hurt with the kind of dominance that the outside forces were having on manufacturing in India. And how can Indians have self-respect if we don't fight that, if we don't produce for ourselves? And look at the number of people that we are. If we become industrialized, we will be losing those hands that are there. They will become unemployed because we are producing people in such large numbers. We must give work to everybody. Every individual must have work and we must sustain, was his idea. So he says Swadeshism is not a cult of hatred. It is a doctrine of selflessness. It has roots in the purest ahimsa. So he says we cannot, as I told you earlier, we can't be banning the person, but the action. Action must be what we must be rejecting and not the people associated with it. So he thought khadi was the means to economic liberation of the masses. He observed that political liberty must include economic liberty of the starving millions. Poverty was considered to be one of the biggest impediment in attaining Purna Swaraj, as it dehumanized human beings, undermined their sense of dignity, and wasted potential. So he said wealth is an attitude of the mind. It is not necessary that everybody should have a lot of money. It is self-sustenance, that everybody has something to eat and clothes to wear and somewhere to stay and work of their hands. And they eat with the sweat of their brow. And he also, very, very particular that the life of a lawyer or a doctor is the same as the tiller of the soil or a carpenter or a person who is stitching shoes and slippers, because they have a right to earn their living by the skills they have. So it is not the amount of money that you earn, but it is the work that you do that one must consider as wealth. So let's come to Madras and Gandhi now. Mahatma Gandhi has visited this many places in Tamil Nadu. This many places in Tamil Nadu. And he came to Madras 22 times. He came to Madras 22 times, and Tamils and Tamilians had a special place in his heart because it was the Tamil labor in South Africa that he began the social activism there first. We know the story of Balasundaram, don't we? So first time he came was in 1896 as the secretary of Natal Indian Congress. He was already famous, and the Balasundaram incidents in South Africa had reached Madras to add to it. When he was earning a lot of money as a lawyer in South Africa. He was really getting prosperous. At that time, he also looked at, he was writing briefs for Indians there, Indian traders. He was representing Indians in South Africa as a lawyer, and he was making a lot of money. One day, a young man came running to his office. His mouth was bleeding. He fell at his feet, and he was a Tamilian, Balasundaram. He said, he was an indentured labor who his owner had beaten him black and blue because he had asked for some money to go back to India for a short while and come back. His owner was not hearing any of it. That is when Gandhi realized that he must become a social activist. after dealing with Balasundaram's case, he realized that he should now become a social activist. He should represent Indians. He said, I'm giving up all my practice. I do not want to earn money as a lawyer. I will represent the Indians, and I will be writing letters to the government. And all I ask is that you buy me my stationery, my ink, and my two sets of clothing for me. And we will live in a community, and we will grow our own food, and we will not earn any money. So when he comes here, already Times of India and Madras Mail had announced he was there, and there was a meeting in Pachayappa Hall, and he's said to have seen the play Harishchandra, produced by uh, uh, I'm not able to see my screen, at Victoria Public Hall, Pambal Sambandham at Victoria Public Hall, and there was a run for his green pamphlet. So green pamphlet was what he wrote. He listed out the injustices meted out to Indians in South Africa. Even there, he was not asking for independence. He was saying, we are your subjects. Treat us as subjects equally. You can't be discriminating because we are Indians. We must have the same rights as everybody else. So he was listing this injustices meted out to Indians in South Africa. He stayed in Madras for 2 weeks. He also kept meticulous account of his expenses. Uh, he perhaps had some skin infection, because the account shows that he bought some sandal paste ointment. And he has given accounts for every penny that he has spent every day. And he gave a few annas to some street magicians he saw in Madras in that visit. 1915 visit was even more dramatic. They all said, he's coming, and they went running and all over, and um, they saw that Mr. and Mrs. Gandhi were traveling in the third class. And actually, they had brought a sarot, a carriage, horse-driven carriage, to the railway station. But the students were so enthusiastic that they released the horses, and they dragged the chariot and took Mr. Mr. and Mrs. Gandhi to G.A. Natashan's house in Sunkarama Chetty Street. So Gandhi and Kasturba had been allotted 2 rooms there. Cots with soft mattresses, chairs, and tables had been arranged. He got them all remote, saying there was no need for any luxury. Early morning, before dawn, he got up and wanted to go for a walk to the beach. And Mr. Natashan said, can we go after a cup of coffee? He asked. Gandhi said, no, I don't drink coffee. You drink your coffee and come back. And he started walking to the beach. And Mr. Natashan is said to have had a quick coffee and ran up to catch up with Gandhi. In 1916, hearing rumors that Gandhi was visiting Madras, crowds thronged to Madras Central Station to look at every train that puffed in, only to be disappointed. When he actually arrived, there was no crowd, because people thought he was coming. And then in that visit, touring Victoria Students' Hostel, he was surprised that there were hostels for Smartha, Iyengar, Andhra, etc. And he chided the students about it. He also attended a college debate and inaugurated the Madras Christian College Debating Society. He sent his son Devdas as the first Hindi pracharak to Madras. Of course, Devdas ended up marrying a Tamil girl, Lakshmi, Rajaji's daughter. So in 1919, Rajaji had rented a house on Cathedral Road, where Hotel Chola came up, and now it's called Fortune something, I think. And that was a bungalow that was owned by Kasturi Rangayengar. It was rented by Rajaji, and that is the first time that Rajaji met Gandhi, and he hosted him in that house. Dr. Nanjun Rao is said to have brought Subramanya Bharati and introduced, he didn't know who this young man, and Subramanya Bharati is said to have invited Gandhi to come for some meeting, and Gandhi said, I cannot do it. And Subramanya Bharati is said to have given a very passionate speech, and Gandhi said, we must look after this young man. Then on 18th March 1919, he addressed what was reported as a monster meeting on Marina Beach. And that is the time when he announced a hartal, and the unfortunate Jallianwala Bagh was happened after this. I heard a story that, you have a black stone mark in front of Presidency College on the beach, and that is where the meeting took place. I heard a story that the principal of the college had forbidden students from attending that meeting by Gandhi, and some students, including Nobel laureate S. Chandrasekhar, are said to have gone for that meeting, and they were fined by the principal. And there was one fairy tale story that the clock on the dome of the Presidency College was set up by the fine that was collected. I don't know if that story is true or not, but there was an incredible number of people in 1919 on Marina Beach to listen to Gandhi. And later he went to the Hindu office and unveiled the portrait of the Hindu late editor, S. Kasturi Ranga Iyengar, at the office in 1925. Look at this picture. The station superintendent of Madras Central Station sends a telegram to Gandhi saying, when you come, the whole station is full of people who are coming to receive you in the railway station, and other passengers are inconvenienced because of that. So why don't you get down in Ambattur and we will come and receive you there. Gandhiji did one better. He came 2 days earlier. But even then people got to know that he had come, and they all rushed to meet him. And this was his Maunam day. He was not speaking. He once, one day in a week, he would keep silent for 24 hours. And this was his Maunam day, and he has not said a word. But all the reporters are busy writing down what is happening there. This is supposed to be Kalki Krishnamurti, the writer. So he arrives at the Hindi Prachar Sabha, and he had given out certificates to many people who had passed the Hindi exam convocation. He presided over the convocation at the Hindi Prachar Sabha. There is no sound, but this is unbelievable that we have a video recording of that visit. This is where the opposite there was a movie hall called the Sun Theatre near G.N. Chetty Road, the corner where G.N. Chetty Road meets Mount Road, and where the Congress grounds have come up now, where now the Kamarajar Hall stands and beyond. There they had set up this big exhibition, and Gandhi was brought from Ambattur station here. He is said to have they had said that there would be no meeting that evening because it was his Maunam day and he needed to rest. But he told them at 3 o'clock that 5 o'clock meeting can be open to the public. At 5, there were 12,000 people at Hindi Prachar Sabha in T Nagar. And they just couldn't contain the number of people that came. So they had to move him to the Congress grounds again. And he wanted to see the gates that were put up, very ornamental gates. There was one gate called Kasturba Gate, there was one gate called Gandhi Gate, etc. So he wanted to look at the gates. And while he was walking from Tanikachalam Street, he realized that the other gate was a little far away. So he comes walking towards the Tenampet, from opposite the Takkar Bapa. He walks there and he sees a bus going, and he stops the bus and gets into the bus and says, "Can you drop us at the other side of the Mount Road?" And people in the bus could not believe their eyes that it was Gandhiji traveling with them in that bus, and they would go home and tell about it. That evening, in the big meeting that happened, Gandhi was speaking in Hindi, and it was being translated into Tamil. Some of the people who were Telugu speaking raised a voice saying, "Please translate in Telugu also." And Gandhi said, it's too cumbersome to do that. And he got a little upset over it. And then he said, "I will not speak in English. I will only speak in Hindi, because English is the language of the oppressor. He was the one who was ruling us." So the Hindi became an issue even then, at that time. So Hindi was an issue in India, in Tamil Nadu, basically, not in India. He wanted an alternative language as a link language in India, alternative to English. There is a mixed opinion about it, that he was against English. He was not against English. He wanted an Indian language to replace English as a link language, because we are speaking so many different tongues in India. So he said, if you want to work through non-violence, you have to proceed with small things, not big, those that are near, not far. Who works here? The ordinary Indian, and not the English or the Indian elite. They would control cloth production. Where simple homes in Indian villages, towns, and cities would be the new centers of production, not the mills of Manchester, Lancashire, Bombay, or Ahmedabad. So he said, even if you are sitting at home and spinning, you are a freedom fighter. And so wear homespun khadi. It becomes the symbolic fabric through which unity of purpose in non-cooperation and sustainability would be expressed in Swadeshi ethos, he said. Why? Purna Swaraj and not the imperial profits would be the ultimate aim of cloth production. When the national flag in khadi cloth would be emblematic of the people's hope when India would be free from imperial control. The process is the creation of a new mentality to guide that would be diametrically opposite to hegemonic imperial or elitist model, where the khadi mentality, decentralization of production and distribution, will be the foundation process, where social change would begin in the remotest of villages. So for him, decentralization was an important thing in production.
The spinning wheel, Gandhi said, is a national necessity. Not on the clatter of arms, but on the reintroduction of the spinning wheel depends the economic and moral regeneration of India. While touring the country incessantly and tirelessly, Gandhi did not lose sight of India's gravest problem, poverty. India as a nation, he observed, can live and die only for the spinning wheel.
So in my home, they were spinning. And my mother says when she was a younger girl, they were all spinning, and her friends and others would spin and give the yarn in Khadi Banda in exchange for something from Khadi Banda. So little girls would bring home pepper or dal or even clothes at some times. So it was that kind of empowerment that Gandhi was looking at. Imagine the empowerment of a little girl who can bring something to the house because she sat and spun on the spinning wheel. So the message of the spinning wheel is much wider than its circumference, he said. Its message is one of simplicity, service of mankind, living so as to not hurt others, creating an indissoluble bond between the rich and the poor, capital and labor, the prince and the peasant. So the choice given to clothing, a conventional form of non-verbal communication, a historical, economic, social, psychological, cultural, and moral significance had no precedence and has no parallel in terms of scale, context, method, and consequence. The dress revolution he initiated transformed a disunited and submissive mass of over 383 million people.
Sahana bhavatu sahanau bhunaktu sahaviryam karvavahe tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahe. Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Mangalam,
was not just the cloth production, it was the mentality that he was looking at. And with this comes cleanliness, having that fearlessness of cleaning toilets, keeping the toilets clean, and looking at your surroundings, looking clean, keeping your body clean, and never seeing anybody who is cleaning as unclean, and accepting everybody as part of this world, and as having the same right as you have in everything they do. So these are the kind of things that the mentality required in Gandhi's idea of Swadeshi. It was in 1921, he came to Madras and he had worn kurta, but he goes to Madurai, and there he decides to change into knee-length dhoti. So it was in Tamil Nadu, that in Madras Presidency, that he changed his costuming, and it was here that he decided to represent the poorest of poor people, and look at Swadeshi as an idea rather than a slogan. So for him, working with the body and being proud of who you are and having no fear was Swadeshi for him. And Madras was an important part of his struggle for to achieve this. When we know the story how he started in Champaran in 1917, how Mr. Shukla came to see him and took him to Champaran, where the indigo production, Teen Takia was there, and how he became a lawyer to fight for the poor people. But there, it wasn't enough for him to just fight for their right, but it was also the way they were living, the unhygienic conditions that they were living in. And it's there is a story about how he asked Kasturba to come and teach hygiene to the women. And when she said, I don't know their Bhojpuri language, I mean, I don't know the language. She was a Gujarati woman. So she said, how can I go and talk to these women? So he said, just go knock on a hut, ask for water, and you will make friends with the women. So she goes to a hut and she knocks, and somebody says, Kaun hai? And she says, I want water, pani chahiye. And a hand comes out after some time with a brass lota of water. And she says, are you not going to call me in? It was a hand with the bangles. And the voice inside told her that there was only one piece of clothing in the house, and her sister-in-law had worn it to the field. So she cannot open the door. And so Kasturba comes crying with tears in her eyes. She talks to Gandhi about it. And that makes him very upset and angry and depressed. And he says, this is what we must fight. Poverty and that helplessness. We must not ever feel helpless because we are poor. We must be self-sufficient. That is when he sets up school in Champaran for teaching hygiene, self-respect, and he was banned from Champaran. But that is where J.B. Kripalani, Mrs. Gandhi, Rajendra Prasad, he got all young lawyers of that district to come and interview, because he didn't know the dialect of the people there. So he called all the young lawyers to go home to homes and do a survey and do interviews with everybody and come and give a report to him. While he was fighting this case in Champaran, he comes to Madras for one day, one single day. He comes from Ahmedabad on the way to Ranchi. He comes to Madras to consult some legal luminaries and goes to Ranchi from Ahmedabad. Can you imagine in those days traveling third class train and in a steam engine that was slow, and coming all the way to Madras and then going to Ranchi just to consult legal luminaries on this case? So he has been coming to Madras, and Madras has been a part of a very, very important part of his struggle for independence. Purna Swaraj for him was not just political independence. It was also an independence from superstitions, from things that held back humanity, human condition, and it is the respect for another person, wherever that person might be, higher or lower, whatever that person's caste or creed might be, and that person is the same as you and has a right to worship whatever that person worships. Because he always said, if you have a Muslim friend, make that person a better Muslim. If you have a Christian friend, make that person a great better Christian. And he never agreed to be converted, however much he was coerced into converting. But he said, for him, Gita was his guide. And he said, Gita says, you only do your work and never fear doing your work, and never aspire for the results of it, because the result is not in your right. Only to work is your right. That was his Gita, and he by hearted the whole of Bhagavad Gita, and he has written his own commentary on the Gita. So here was an absolutely extraordinary person who was neither a saint nor a politician nor an activist, because he didn't want any power once India got independence. He was not even a primary member of the Congress party when he died, and he did not acquire anything, and none of his children got anything because of his name. So this is what we have produced. There was this man who coming generations will not believe, or it has already happened. Already people are not believing that a person like this existed in our midst.
So feeble yet vibrant, Gandhi continued his after-prayer talk.
आखिर की एक बात कहकर मैं खत्म करूंगा.
The explosion was from a bomb thrown by a Hindu refugee to kill Gandhi. Gandhi remained unruffled.
ऐसे हम डर जाएंगे तो सचमुच यहाँ कोई हो जाए तो हमारा हाल कैसा होगा. सुनो 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 सब सुनो, कुछ नहीं हुआ है. चलिए शांत रहिए.
Relying on God, he refused to accept any kind of human protection. On Friday, January 30th, Gandhi asked for pending letters. I must reply to them today, for tomorrow I may never be. During his conversation with Sardar Patel at 4:30, Gandhi had his usual evening meal. It was getting near prayer time. I hate being late, Gandhi averred, and rose to go to the prayer ground. At the sunset hour, with thoughts of prayer in his mind, Gandhi walked along to seek communion with God, who had illumined his path all through life till his progress was interrupted. The perverse assassin of the ages came with his unholy design and accomplished the foul deed. Nathuram Godse lodged a hot lead in the soft flesh of the man who had known no enemy. Choked with emotion, Jawaharlal Nehru said,
The light has gone out of our lives and there is darkness everywhere. Our beloved leader, Bapu as we called him, the father of the nation, is no more. The light has gone out, I said, and yet I was wrong, for the light that shone in this country was no ordinary light. The light that has illumined this country for these many years will illumine this country for many more years.
The United Nations organization lowered its flag. Peoples of all races felt as one human family in mourning. This man of divine mission laid down his life for the reconciliation of all men in brotherhood and love, became enshrined in millions and millions of hearts, and shone like a beacon for the whole world. He was perhaps the greatest symbol of the India of the past and of the India of the future. He was the victorious one in death as in life. His legacy is courage, his banner, truth, his weapon, love. The best prayer that can be offered is to obey the mandates of the Master and to follow the path for which he lived and died.
रघुपति राघव राजा पतित पावन सीताराम ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरो नाम सबको सन्मति दे भगवान.
So, be true, he said. Don't accept any kind of opinions that come to you unless you examine whether it is really true or not. Because there are always different sides to every story, and it's always better to know the different sides of every story. This is what Gandhi said. I am open to questions now.
Hi, Devika, that was a wonderful talk, very illuminating. I think we can have more sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have one question for now from Nitya. She has asked, Swadeshi has a totally different connotation, unfortunately, today.
Yeah.
Your comment on this?
Well, it has a different connotation today, but it has a connotation which is very different from what Gandhi talked about. Gandhi talked about Swadeshi means decentralization. For him, it is the smallest unit that has to take decisions. So that is very different today, So this was his idea. It was Gandhi's imagination, Gandhi's idea of what Swadeshi meant to him was decentralization. I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Anybody else?
Well, there is some comments, very interesting comments. There's one from Vikrant. Thank you, very informative. We absolutely need more knowledge that needs to be shared like this. So I guess we are very overwhelmed with the information we've been given. From the number of times Gandhi visited Chennai, so I have a question, but if there are anyone else, anyone who wants to ask a question, can you please come forward? You can, I guess Aryamba can unmute them, and then I can ask my question in the end.
Everybody can now unmute if they have a question, please.
Okay. So in the face
I think
of,
we can.
Yeah. So my question today is, Swadeshi is back on track now, considering COVID and unreliability on globalization. We need to be more centrally decentralize things, each nation to its own. Manufacturing should be done here. So how can we achieve it? The dependence on so many nations with technology, of course, we are still very dependent. So your thoughts on these, please.
Yeah, we are a globalized nation now. It takes something to become decentralized. You know, it takes some courage to become decentralized. And that courage Gandhi was talking about. We are interdependent. At the same time, I think what Gandhi talked about when he was talking about banning foreign cloth and first he said, let us spin. So first we should start manufacturing here, and then talk about banning things from other countries. I think it's first we should start working for ourselves. You know, cleanliness, toilet cleaning, all this Gandhi was talking about, isn't it? And that was all part of his Swadeshi idea. Innovations in toilet, the use of water. You know, he was giving a big talk about the use of water. He said a time will come when water will be sold, he said. So you have to look at managing water and depending on the climate that you have. So you can't be creating things that require too much of natural resources where you're ridding, bleeding or just exploiting the natural resources to its fullest. So you have to look at what you can produce and how you can produce and how much you want in life. You know, what is it that you need in your life? What is it that you want from life? Is another question that we have to ask ourselves, isn't it? And I think COVID has kind of given us that, forcibly given us some of those questions and how much do we need and what is it that we can live without is a question that we can ask ourselves now.
Anyone else have a question?
Devika, there is
Yeah.
recently in a talk on Swadeshi or actually it was on environment, one of the textile activists from Andhra Pradesh spoke about, the women of Adilabad producing so much of cotton and it is carried to the factories, whereas they themselves unfortunately wear saris of polyester. And he said, look at this. I mean, first of all, apart from the non-biodegradability of the polyester fabric, he said the fact that they cannot, be comfortable in this fiber. He said, isn't this a great injustice we are doing to people?
Absolutely, absolutely, because cheaper material has come up, you know, and it's easier to take care of polyester material. It's cheaper, so it's the mindset that when one has to work on, isn't it? And if we all decide, if we at the time of freedom struggle, people who were wearing big suits and wearing silks, etc., they all gave up and they started wearing khadi. You know, Sardar Patel was wearing suits, but he gave up and he started wearing khadi. There were millions of Indians who decided that they were wearing khadi. It was one way of equalizing, you know, the very rich and the very poor also they were all wearing khadi. So it's the decision of the people what you will wear, how you will wear it, isn't it? So for this, a lot of discussion needs to take place about Swadeshi and what we can do, and also make these things accessible to them, because khadi has now become such a luxury item that people are not able to get it for themselves, even though khadi bandars are selling them at discount rates, etc. But it is also the accessibility of these materials to everybody. It's an ironical situation, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Mr. Mohan is here.
Oh, yes, yes.
He can add to it, isn't it?
Yes, really. I was asked to summarize your talk within 2 minutes. Okay. I'm happy that the meeting started exactly on time, which itself has a Gandhian flavor. And my association with Gandhian Study Center and the movements
Sir,
back to
ஒரே
40
ஒரு
years.
நிமிஷம் Mr. Mohan. I think you
சொல்லுங்க.
need to be introduced. You are going to be introduced by somebody.
Yeah.
ஒரே ஒரு நிமிஷம்.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that brilliant talk, Devika. Just mind-blowing the way you bring Gandhi to us each time you talk about him. So we're very happy to have Mr. Mohan Krishnamurthy, the chairman of the Gandhi Studies Center in T. Nagar, with us today to give his observations on Devika's talk. He says his meeting with the secretary of the Gandhi Peace Foundation, Mr. T.D. Tirumalai, changed his entire life and made him take great interest in Gandhi the man. Mr. Mohan traveled 3,000 kilometers in Tamil Nadu for 17 days, visiting the cities, villages, and institutions where Gandhi visited during his multiple visits to Tamil Nadu. And he realized that Gandhi still lives on in some form or the other in all of these places. He has participated in 2 Gandhian Padayatras in 1970 and 75, and in the cycle yatra from Hosur to Madurai. The Satyagraha in South Africa, written by Gandhi, has intrigued him, and Mr. Mohan has translated Gandhi and One World from English to Tamil. Thank you, Mr. Mohan, for being here. We'd appreciate if you can share your comments.
Thank you. My sincere thanks to Devika Madam and Padma Swaminathan and Sujata Shankar. I will not take more than 2 minutes. Though my association with this Gandhian movement and real selfless Gandhi's sacrifice, the people who sacrificed their everything, along with my association with them is nearly more than 40 years. So I get so much of information from them. I got it. But Devika today presented a different Gandhi, really. It's very unique. I have seen that film also, his visits to England in 1931. But a point which he has said, I could not, before that, I could not visualize it. He went with only one cloth, that is maybe upper covering and then a loin cloth. And then he exposed his head and also the foot. That too hard, cold, that winter in England, unbelievable. So she said, it is fearlessness. That's right. I think Nehru has rightly introduced Gandhi to all of us as the person who removed fear from everybody, and especially from women. I remember my mother and my aunt and other things. They were not allowed to speak or go out and like from outside. So that was the situation of the women. And Devika has very rightly pointed out from the first picture itself, see the fearlessness in the eyes of a woman, that too especially seeing a policeman. So I am happy that I got that aspect of Gandhi, that fearlessness, he got it, and he transferred to everybody, especially to women. I am convinced, as I have been introduced, I love that book, Satyagraha in South Africa. Gandhi was able to get, he was able to get that what he wanted there because of women's participation in 1913. The Marriage Act said that Hindu marriages were not allowed. Only Christian marriages were allowed in South Africa. The people like Kasturiba and Thilayadi Valliammai, our Tamilian girl, they participated in it, against it. So Gandhi got that much of power. So as Devika has rightly said, he was able to convince the women, and then he was able to install fearlessness in women. So he got it. So that's why I was very much impressed by that personality, because an ordinary person could achieve so much. And now, since we are all very much worried inside, and then people like me, aged people, for fear with so much of anxiety and other things, don't worry. Throw away your fear first. And as Devika madam has rightly said, it is not for food. It is not the poverty alone. It is the honor. In Tamil, they say tanmanam. Our dress, our dress is so light that it covers and gives us, in Tamil, they say tanmanam. So the honor of India was losing in those days. So he was very much worried about that. And we used to say in his encounter in in South Africa also, not for any other thing, but the honor. The people were not treated as human beings at all. So, as Devika Madam has rightly said, these two things, the fearlessness of every people in India, whether it is a male or a female or even children, should be installed in it. The fearlessness. That is nothing but you can go to God next. Second one is the honor, which is the pride, as I told. Then if these two have that, then definitely we will love everybody. I will conclude it with a small incident, only one incident, which elaborates Gandhi's eco-friendly behavior towards everything. I mean, he was asked to, Mr. Kaka Kalelkar, his associate, was asked to bring a small bit of neem branch so that it can be made into a toothpaste for to brush it in the morning. And that person has bought a very big branch. And then he was very angry. He said, "You have done a great harm. It is violent." And Kaka Kalekar says, "What is this violence? No, how much you want, you are only permitted to take from a tree, because it is growing, it is doing photosynthesis and preparing all those things. You are not expected to get more than what you want it." So that aspect of it, how much we want it, that only we are allowed to take it. So he said, take only a bit of it. And that person, Kaka Kalekar, made it into a brush and gave it to him. Gandhi used it and gave it back and make me another bit of it so that I can use it for the next day. And Kaka Kalekar says, "What, Gandhi, you are so bad. There is plenty of it. Why can't you use it? I will throw it away and get it another one." So no, till it becomes so small that we are unable to use it, we have no right to use it. That's the right word. We have no right to exploit nature for our selfishness. So it becomes, as I used to say, he was so much concerned about not only human beings and the living things, plants also, the animal, the vegetation, other things. He believed that they too have life. And he said, sorry, I am taking a small bit of it. I won't take more than that. Like that, you have to get it. How much interaction he has. So I am happy that I could say more something to what Devika madam has added. So he was more eco-friendly also, which is so much needed now. Unless we have that, you can get it from Gandhi also. I hope I have finished it. I have taken a little more than 2 minutes. Kindly excuse me. I am extremely happy that I am very thanks to Devika madam, Sujata madam, and Padma Swaminathan and everybody to express my few words. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So nice. Extremely good.
Thank you, sir.
May I say one small thing in continuation of what Mr. Mohan said? You know, I'm sure many of us remember that, many of us remember how trees used to be pruned on our streets.
Yes.
And there were people with knowledge. But the small thing they used to do was, tree cut பண்றதுக்கு மின்னாடி, they would light a little camphor and put kungumam on that tree and then tie it with ropes.
Yes.
And only then climb on the tree and then cut it.
Yes.
So there was this thing of respect for the tree.
Yes. Yes.
It is not that they couldn't have, cut it, and that is what we have lost. That link with nature and respect for nature.
Yes.
And traditional knowledge still had that, still has that respect for nature. They express it in different ways. Today, you see when people come with electric, cutters to come and prune the trees,
Horrible
they have
trees.
no understanding of how it is to be cut, and very often the tree dies. And I think this is what we need to do. If you cut less, and as Gandhi and in the example that you gave, if we cut less, the tree will survive, and it will continue to sort of protect us and keep nature in harmony. I think that is the understanding we need to have about taking less from the environment. I'm sorry for sort of butting in like this, but I felt Mr. Mohan's comment. I wanted to just recall what many of us knew as children, and we have lost that particular.
That part of it. Yes. Really, thank you. Thanks a lot. Really.
Thank you.
Very happy.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Mr. Mohan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Soumya, go
Thank you,
ahead.
Taram.
That really touched our hearts. On behalf of Intach Chennai, I would like to extend my most sincere thanks to Devika and Mohan sir for readily accepting to give the talk in spite of their busy schedules. Dr. Devika has been associated with Intach for a long time, and it's really worth mentioning that she did contribute by sharing some of her work in relation to Gandhi with a lot of school children. Thank you for being a transformation warrior by handling communication to the youth about Gandhian principles in a very evocative way. We worked with Mohan sir on a Legdam session at Harishri Vidyalaya on Khadi, and you really kept the kids in rapt attention with your passion on the subject.
Yes, I remember it.
Same thing was reflected today also, sir. In the current scenario, we appreciate the appropriateness of the Swadeshi concept. The point driven home was fearlessness, with which we have to face the struggles in the economy in the midst of one of the worst slowdowns. So think local. Dr. Devika's cheerfulness and enthusiasm to share knowledge and the quiescent nature of Gandhi together is a great educational package for this generation. They say a picture speaks 1,000 words, but your black and whites spoke more.
Yes.
I'm sure the present generation will ruminate over the various things touched upon and act. Lastly, I would like to thank all our team members for working very hard to make this talk happen. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. ரொம்ப சந்தோஷம்.
Thank you.
எப்படியோ சுஜாதா சங்கர் என்ன ஜாயின் பண்ண வச்சுட்டாங்க. ரொம்ப சிரமப்பட்ட ப்ராப்ளம் ஆயிட்டது. நடுவில் ஜாயின் பண்ணவே முடியல. அப்புறம் ஒய்ஃப் இதுக்கு போய் அப்புறம் லேப்டாப்ல வந்துட்டேன். மாளவிகா மேடம், தேங்க் யூ.
Hi, bye.
Hi, bye. This is
Sushila. Hi.
I don't know why. I think the TV has decided not to show my face, so that's fine. I don't know why. It's not. I just wanted to say hi and fantastic. And talking about what Tara said about the tree and the rope, one of the things I thought of was that, over time, there's a general feeling that old world respect is seen as submissiveness. It's been translated as if you're respectful, it means you're submissive.
Yes.
Somewhere we've lost that translation. Somewhere we've kind of made that translation, and I think that's where the whole thing stems from. It applies to trees, it applies to the environment. So that, the whole concept of respect has been translated into submissiveness, as if it is submissive. It's not submissive. Being respectful doesn't mean you're submissive. And the translation there we've lost.
Yeah, when we are respectful, we are actually being respectful to ourselves.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Self-respect only.
Yeah, it's yeah.
But at the NGO, we've lost that. I don't know.
Anybody.
It's seen as old-fashioned, so you can't.
No. It is deep down in every kid and every youngsters. I am able to feel it, but we are a little bit older and grown up, so we are not able to identify it. It is there. It is there. When we say about Gandhi, they identify it and then it comes out.
Yeah.
Devika and myself are confident about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
Hope
we have,
springs eternal.
yes, we have to work for it. That's the problem.
Yes.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, really. Intach has done a great
Thank
thing.
you so much.
Yes, really. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you.